Welcome to Medical Experts in Football, and I am Taiwo Adeshipin, your host. Today's guest is someone who grew up in Fairbanks, Alaska. She's a soccer fan who was just 2 days away from working in the Premier League. That dream was cut short, but the lesson she's learned has helped her to go on to do incredible things in the sports medicine world. She's known for her work with the ACL injury prevention, the clinical prediction guideline, which she is currently working on updating, and her extensive involvement with American Physical Therapy Association. Many know of her name because of the many articles she's published, but let me tell you, she was once that person who attended a soccer medicine conference in Europe with hopes of networking, but nearly left just meeting two people. One person asked her for a pencil, and the other wanted her to translate a poster to Greek. Today, she has her doctorate in physical therapy and a PhD from the University of Delaware. And two doctoral degrees didn't stop her from pursuing her postdoctoral in Sweden. She'll be headed overseas this year for a new job opportunity to work as a PT for Red Bull, but she won't be going alone. Rubber ducky Squeaky Edgar keeps her company and steals the show when it comes to photos. Check her out on her Instagram, Squeaky Edgar. I welcome you, physical therapist and researcher, Amy Arundale. As you know, this podcast is all about soccer and sports medicine. But you are currently working as a biomechanist for the Brooklyn Nets. But that won't be for long. You announced you'd be transitioning to work with Red Bulls in Australia. Congrats. And what will you be doing there?
So I will be working at their Athlete Performance Center, which is it's actually in Austria. It's in Thalgo, Austria, which is just outside of Salzburg. So I'll be a PT at the Athlete Performance Center, which is kind of like their kind of athlete headquarters. So any Red Bull athlete can come to the APC for rehab. Sometimes they'll come for training. They might come for preseason or just a check-in to say do metric, and then helping out where teams need, whether that be maybe a team on the road like a MotoGP team or to maybe soccer teams who are a little bit more set in a certain location. I'll be hopefully helping out with the soccer teams a fair amount as well.
So how did that opportunity come about?
So it actually came about, Mike Davison is someone who I consider a mentor and a friend. He actually sent me the job posting asking if I knew anyone who was qualified in Europe, and thinking about it and looking at the job advertisement. It was actually something that sounded really interesting to me, and sounded like something that would be really exciting. And so the more those conversations kind of developed, the more it sounded like something that I really wanted to pursue.
Now, why Austria though? What about Austria excited you?
Well, it's a new place. I haven't been there. I love living in Europe. Chance to kind of be back in Europe for a little while was really exciting, and who knows, maybe permanently. That seemed like a fun new adventure. Obviously learning German is going to be a new challenge. So I started working on that, but I know that being immersed in it will help me out quite a bit in learning. But kind of the chance to work with soccer a little more closely again, the chance to work with Red Bull athletes who are just incredible athletes in just a huge number of disciplines.
Incredible. So you mentioned how you would still be working as a contracted PT for the Brooklyn Nets. How does that work? Will you be traveling back and forth?
No, I probably won't travel while I'm here in New York. I'm still helping out a little bit, but it may just mean supporting them in ways that I can. So could be helping potentially look at or care for European players that are in Europe. It could be helping in other ways, like running injury reports and other like movement assessments and projects that they need help with. Remaining kind of part of the Nets family, essentially.
That's awesome. Okay, now on to soccer. So, as a young girl, you grew up in Alaska, you played soccer, you then went on to play college soccer, you've been a coach, a trainer in the States and in Europe. How did you develop an interest in soccer?
So I think I started out in like ballet, and then my ballet teacher moved and floated around a few different sports. And then most of my friends were playing soccer. And so I started playing and had an amazing first coach, really kind of loved it. And really enjoyed it because at that point it was hanging out with friends. And then when I was in fourth and half of fifth grade, my family lived in Cambridge, England. And while I was there, got the chance to play for my elementary school team there, and was selected as the Cambridge United mascot of the week. So I was actually the first girl to be selected.
Nice.
Back in like 1996. I would dance to, like go in the locker room pregame and meet players. And of course I was mortified of them all. I was so shy. But then got to run out on the field and present the match ball. That was kind of the thing that really set it on fire in my heart. My coach there was an Arsenal fan, and I've been an Arsenal fan ever since. And came back and was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Of course, not really having any concept of where I stood and the implications of growing up in Alaska. But, shortly thereafter, the 99 World Cup team won the Women's World Cup, and that was it.
Okay, so one of your role models is your mom, who also got a PhD and postdoctoral degree. What advice did your mom give you when it came to pursuing a higher education?
She gives advice when something's like going wrong. She was very, very good at, knowing the right thing to say when things went wrong. But in terms of actually heading into it, a lot of it was just her example. Both my parents work incredibly hard. I think my memories when I was really young was that it was just kind of normal that even on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, my parents would go in and to their office and work. And it was kind of just I just kind of entertained myself. And they'd set me up, like I'd have, things to play with. They'd be in their office doing research and writing. And that was the example that I grew up with. And then my mom actually went and got her second PhD when I was in middle school, or like late elementary and middle school. So kind of having the example of, she took care of us and cooked all our meals and, took us to school and then came back and did coursework. It was kind of really a big example of, you can absolutely do this. And there's nothing that says, if you're not happy with what you're doing, you can go out and change it. That was a real example that in a lot of ways kind of freed me from like the fear of choosing a profession, in terms of like, yeah, I can pick something now, and if it's not good, I can go change it. I'm not tied to this forever. And so I think that was a pretty amazing example to have at a young age.
And when deciding on a career, you said you realized you like to work with conscious people versus unconscious people, but you also like the PT profession because of the relationships formed.
Yeah.
Where were you when you realized physical therapy was a profession for you?
I think it was a little bit of a combination. I'd spent time coaching, and I knew a lot of people in the coaching realm. I realized kind of how uncertain that world was, which is ironic working in professional sports because that's quite uncertain as well.
Yeah.
But the uncertainty of having a job next year based on your results, that kind of started not to be really appealing. But and also having the combination of not only the coaching and the relationships that you get in that regard, but then the scientific part, the science and medicine part always really kind of grabbed my attention. And I'd spent some time with the orthopedic surgeon who'd done my knee scope at home in Alaska. I'd shadowed him, as well as shadowed some of the PTs that I'd done PT with growing up. And just the surgeon that I had was, amazing. He's one of these people who, might have, 50 people on his schedule, but if there's somebody who's, deciding what surgery to do, or if they're going to do surgery and the implications, he's going to spend the time that decision needs with them. So, sometimes it means he's running, 2 hours late. But when he's with you, he is with you. And I really appreciate that, because I know that's really tough. And not everyone is like that. But I realized that, a lot of his interactions were 5 to 10 minutes, and that was it. And then you didn't see them again for 6 months. Whereas really getting to build those relationships that I already knew from my own experience, but also love from the coaching side. It was kind of a combination of kind of all of those experiences. And in a way, also getting away from my undergrad had a very strong push towards med school. And so I really felt a push towards med school. But getting away from that, being in Scotland, kind of putting all of those experiences together kind of was that like moment where I was like, okay, actually PT is the way for me.
So you were close to working with the Premier League club. What happened?
So unfortunately, my visa was rejected.
Bummer.
So it had been my goal, and I think I think it's still in the scope of my goals to work in the Premier League. Growing up loving soccer, the Premier League in a lot of ways is really kind of a pinnacle of soccer. And my goal is to work in actually academies, not necessarily the first team, but I really love working with athletes who are still growing, who are developing, and that's something that I really enjoy doing. So I'd been applying and had made it through the interview process, and unfortunately, kind of just given the job market and my only having U.S. citizenship, my application was rejected on the basis of the salary. And it just didn't work out with the club to increase that salary. And so I kind of was sent back to the drawing board. So it was, at the time, it felt devastating at the time. I'm glad for it as the experience in retrospect, although it was definitely tough to have what I thought was kind of my dream job kind of fall through. But I think it's also set me on a different path that's been quite rewarding. So.
And what was the biggest lesson you've learned from that?
I think to be flexible. I think to in some ways, I think it was, take the time to in a way grieve, because it was a loss in a way, and certainly emotionally. I was so excited to move, and I really had pretty much everything set to go. I was about 2 days shy of flying over, and to kind of take those steps back and reflect and say, okay, this isn't going to happen. I'm going to take care of myself. And I need to do that because I got to take care of kind of my mental health. Otherwise, I'm not going to do very well, regardless of what I'm going to try to do next. But then, all right, how am I going to pivot? I need a job at this point. So what are my options? And I think it was kind of that combination of taking care of myself, but then also, not spending too long to, I'd say, like, I don't want to say wallow in it, but just kind of like, okay, what's my next step? Let's look at this practically. Let's look at what do we do? How do we make something happen?
Mm-hmm. So do you think it's possible for a PT in the States to work in the Premier League?
I do, and I think we'll see it. It is tough though. A lot of that has to do with the job markets. I mean, it's tough for Brits to come and work here in the States. Part of that is just each country's immigration systems. To justify a visa, they have to justify that there's something that you have that they don't have in their applicant pool. And so from a physical therapy background, it's tough to do that because I'm coming out with, a physical therapy degree and they're coming out with a physical therapy degree. On paper, those look kind of similar and we might have a similar experience. So if we're, similar experience, similar baseline degrees, they've got to hire the UK citizen because there's nothing that says, that really justifies that. No, if I have a little bit more experience and theoretically that doctor of physical therapy could help. In practicality, I haven't actually seen that it does necessarily. But maybe it's more experience. Maybe it's greater connections in the club. For me, it was having a PhD was something that set me apart and had an additional piece to my background that wasn't in their applicant pool. It's definitely not a short process in any way, shape, or form, whether that be moving to Austria or the UK or really anywhere. Definitely doable, but it is a lot harder.
Mm-hmm. For a PT in the States that is interested in the Premier League, would they have to also take like another physical therapy examination before practicing, kind of like what they do in the States?
Yeah, so that's where we're lucky. And so that's where having the doctor of physical therapy does help. We don't have to take their boards. So when I got licensed in the UK, basically it's a probably 150-page packet that you end up having to put together with your syllabi, all of your entire curriculum, kind of the CAPD approval of your program, your licenses, proof that your background check that you haven't, your license has never been revoked. That all gets put together into a large packet and sent to what's called the HCPC, which is kind of their Health and Caring Professions Council. And so the HCPC looks over that application, decides if the education that you have is equivalent to what you would get in the UK. And assuming that happens, which with a DPT, it's actually more than what they get in their bachelor's in physio degree, they'll then approve it. So you become registered with the HCPC, and then you apply to be chartered, part of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists. So it's definitely doable, and you luckily don't have to take the board exam again.
That's good.
There again, it just takes time. I think my whole application process took about probably 6 months or so.
Okay. Let's talk about research. How did you develop an interest in that?
So doing research, I think, was something that was always in the back of my head. And there again, I think I can point to my parents' example and role model. I thought I would eventually do research, but I didn't think I would start it quite as early in my career. So it was always something that I was interested in. It was something that I really appreciated about my undergrad, and part of the reason I chose Haverford was because it had a thesis requirement. So your senior year, you actually wrote a thesis, and you did your own research. And I really liked that idea. So I think it was kind of always in the undercurrents. But I expected to kind of practice for, I don't know how long, and then, maybe go back and get a PhD later on in life. But what happened was I kind of had a big yellow life arrow that said, you should do this now. I'd been working down in North Carolina and loved my job, had an amazing opportunity coming out of Duke to work in a clinic as well as a youth soccer club. But kind of got the chance to meet Lynn Snyder-Mackler, and who's somebody I looked up to from a research perspective, and Holly Silvers, who was someone who I really looked up to from a clinical perspective. And I found out that Holly was going to do her PhD with Lynn, and was kind of looking for what the next step for me might be. This was also when I was starting looking at Premier League jobs initially and applying, and realizing that without something that set me apart, I wasn't going to get very far. And so the opportunity to work with these two amazing women came up. I realized it was something that I think I would really enjoy, but also felt like it was the right timing to do it.
Early on, what was a tough yet much needed lesson you learned during your time there?
One of the things I really learned at Delaware was how to take feedback. And I will say I'm still working on it for sure. But particularly when feedback isn't necessarily framed in a constructive manner, or framed in a manner that you expect it to come, kind of learning to take what's the message and what's the value out of that information and make those changes, whether those be personal changes or your changes to your work. And so whether that's verbal feedback or you're getting reviews on papers, and it seems like the reviewer has read a totally different paper.
Now, when you're doing your research, what is the most demanding aspect?
That's tough. A lot of times it depends on the project, but any kind of, I think, human subjects research comes with all sorts of difficulties, and that just comes with working with humans, whether that be trying to schedule people to come in for follow-up appointments, or helping them understand just the research project, helping them get through rehab. I think you understand what it's like just doing rehab. Sometimes you're a physical therapist and sometimes you're just a therapist. And that happens in research. So I think just the like joys as well as like annoyances that just come with like human subject research is often tough. I think like the data is data. It does what it's there, so you can work with it and analyze it. Then it's probably the human factor of working with computers. So I think publication's definitely tough. Going through the peer review process, I think is really important, really valuable, but can definitely be frustrating at times. But
how does it feel with some of the research projects you're working on, like knowing that you have to do a follow-up and your participants don't show up? What is that feeling like?
It's frustrating. It's easy to just get really focused on the research project itself, get frustrated with them for not showing up. It's for that reminder of having to take that step out and understand what's going on in their life, and that this research project for them doesn't matter. This is, and that's not for everybody. I think there's plenty of people who really understand and invest in that they're being part of a research project, but I think it's remembering that you are not the world. You have to understand what's going on with them, and you have to be sympathetic, and your research really in the end it may be influential, but for them in their worlds, what's going on for them is much more important.
Okay.
I think clinicians feel probably the same thing when you've got a follow-up appointment, or somebody goes you do an eval and you feel like you made a great connection, or you really made some headway, and then they don't show up to their second appointment, and it's almost the exact same feeling.
I know that feeling very well.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Sweden. I was in Östersund and you were in, I want to say, Linköping University. Yep. But let me test your Swedish out. When I say fika, what comes to mind?
Morning coffee.
Nice. Did you have like brunches or lunch dates in Sweden?
Yeah, it was amazing. I loved my time there. The entire physio department at the university get about 9:30, 10 a.m. in the morning. Everybody just kind of wanders into the staff room and sits for half hour, 45 minutes, and just enjoys company. Just has a cup of coffee or a tea. Every Thursday there was a rota so somebody brought in on Thursdays, like a spread of oftentimes it was cheese and meat and bread, and it was just an amazing coming together time. And sometimes there was afternoon fika as well, although it wasn't quite as consistent as morning fika. but it's something Karin Silbernagle tried to bring into at University of Delaware, and it never really picked up. But now I totally understand why she tried, because it really was great.
So after you obtained your PhD, it was probably 3 to 4 months. You then went to Sweden to complete a postdoctoral degree for women soccer players.
Mhm.
What more were you yearning to learn going there?
It was a chance to work with and be mentored by another group of amazing researchers. So I was working with Martin Hagland and Joanna Kvist, as well as Claire Ardern. And so just trying to learn as much as I could from them. And then my kind of job while I was there was working pretty closely with Anna Falkstrom, who finished her PhD with Martin and Joanna around the same time as I finished at Delaware. But she'd collected a just phenomenal amount of data. And so working with her to kind of look at what more could we look at within the data that she'd collected. We ended up looking at was a lot of kind of the jumping measures, looking more at, what does the tuck jump actually look at? Is it related to anything else? And as well as kind of how do measures progress based on how much rehab you've had? So, that's kind of what it ended up being. But I think going in, my real goal was just learning as much as I could from Martin and Joanna and Claire.
And what is the biggest takeaway that you got from them that helped you in your practice?
Yeah, I think, part of it, kind of like you mentioned, just having the chance to see how they work. I think they're incredibly productive, but the stress that they put on their productivity is significantly less than what we have culturally here in the U.S. The idea of, it's okay to take August off, take holiday, and that the summer is a slower period of time. And I think that it's okay to take that step back. It's okay to not work in this like headspace that is go, 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 go. And instead do good work when you can. Things will get done because they're things that you're passionate about doing and you enjoy doing. But it doesn't have to be necessarily with all the stress in the world to get things done all the time.
And do you find yourself today telling yourself, okay, like chill out a little bit?
Especially starting in the NBA, it was something that I think was a great lesson to have had because the NBA schedule is crazy. It's really busy. And I was expecting myself to, get research projects done kind of on the same timelines that I had that was my entire job, when that was my postdoc. And that's just not feasible. And so I think it really was a good lesson to have learned and to have seen there, because it just bringing that back to say, okay, this is a different position. This is a different job. My role is very different and my priorities are very different. So giving myself the space to say, okay, tonight I need to sleep. Tonight, we're flying back from, Washington, D.C. And yes, it's, 10:30 or 11 at night. I could be doing other work, but no, actually my brain just needs to rest. I need to watch something stupid or sleep or just not think about work in whatever form that is. And so giving myself that permission to take care of myself, to give myself that space and not work on kind of crazy timelines or timelines that weren't reasonable based on my job at the Nets was a really good piece that I think having worked in Sweden helped me.
So you've presented about ACL injuries and prevention strategies in a lot of big time stadiums. I saw you've been to Emirates, Wembley Stadium, and Camp Nou in Barcelona. How did you get connected to do that?
A lot of it has been through networking connections that I've made. I've been really lucky in that in doing my PhD research, one of the things Lynn is amazing at doing is helping her PhD students, step forward, kind of really promoting the work that her lab is doing and promoting the people that are doing that work. So Lynn has been a huge mentor and proponent of mine. And then my own network, I think, has been quite valuable as well. So for me, the Isokinetic conference has been really influential. When I first started working, I learned about it and kind of saved up my first year out of PT school, kind of saved up all my money. I used all my continuing education budget to go to Chelsea. It was held at Stanford Bridge that year. I've told this story a few times, but it was really kind of my introduction to networking. I went over. I didn't know very many people at the conference, and by the first day, I was kind of disappointed in myself because I had these high hopes that I was gonna, start making some networking connections. And the first day I'd met like two people, one person because they asked me for a pen at the opening ceremony, and the second because they asked me if they could translate a poster into Greek or something of that sort. And I was kind of beating myself up because here's a conference that's literally a who's who of soccer medicine, of people who I really looked up to and wanted to meet, and I hadn't done anything. And so after, I think, one of the morning sessions, I stayed in one of the rooms, and Dr. Phil Batty was on the panel. He was, leaving the room, and I kind of finally gave myself a self pep talk and got the courage to walk up to him. He was the team doctor at Man City at the time, and he was actually more surprised that I knew who he was than anything else. And that kind of gave me the confidence to start to say, okay, I can introduce myself. Like I may not feel like I, make a big impact in this community right now, but there's nothing wrong with my going and introducing myself. That's the conference actually where I initially met Lynn Snyder-Mackler. I just ran into her in the hallway and introduced myself, and she remembered that. She'll tell you that was our first interaction, and so that kind of was like, okay, this is how I start to build a network, and following up on those network connections with emails, and whether that be every holiday sending Phil a message just saying hey, or whether that's actually reaching out and asking questions when I have them of people. That's how my network has kind of grown, and I've been really lucky to continue to grow it at subsequent conferences. And
so tell me, what was it feeling like stepping foot in one of those big time stadiums, whether that was Camp Nou, the Emirates, or Wembley Stadium?
I'd say pretty awe-inspiring. Obviously you're not down on the pitch and playing. It felt like a huge honor. I'd be lying if I felt like I didn't belong on that stage. But then also had to kind of reflect and say, no, there's people who believe I am supposed to be on this stage. And so it was really exciting, especially the first time when I spoke at Camp Nou. I remember walking up and I remember walking off and I can't say I remember anything except what I've seen in the pictures of the actual talk. And I'm sure I have it on a computer somewhere.
So were you ever tempted to do like a full out sprint on the field just to relive your soccer days?
Well, they won't let you on the pitch, unfortunately.
I didn't think so.
It would have been great. It would definitely would have been. Hopefully, it's only just a little rope, so it wouldn't have been hard to just like hurdle it.
I'm nervous to do a sprint these days because I'm gonna pull a hamstring. Can't do that. Okay, we're gonna go back to the time you were a PT student and you were doing your clinical rotation in Greenville, South Carolina.
Yeah.
And I thought it was funny when you messaged and you were like, I used to drive 2 hours from South Carolina to Atlanta Silverbacks. And during that year, I literally was playing for the semi-professional team there. And for those that don't know, it was a team in Atlanta They no longer exist now. But anyhow, why did you feel the need to make that drive?
I was really lucky. I had an amazing clinical experience there. But there again, it's just my kind of passion for soccer is, I knew to work in soccer, I was probably going to need experience. And so I was kind of really trying to reach out and find as much experience as I could. So I'd gotten to Greenville. I'd talked it through with my clinical instructor. So we actually worked it out. So I left at midday on Friday so I could make it to Atlanta in time for Friday practice.
Wow.
So yeah, I proposed it as an idea and my clinical instructor was all for it. So I'd emailed the Silverbacks ATC and said, hey, can I just come and help? And as you know, when you only have one ATC, trying to support, a decent sized roster, it's a lot. And so, it wasn't anything exciting besides, I was filling water bottles and taping ankles and, doing some massage here and there and, just helping out however I could, just as an extra pair of hands. But Atlanta in the summer is...
Do you remember just stepping foot on that turf field? Oh my gosh.
So the two things that I will never forget are seeing molded cleats go from totally vertical to almost horizontal and brand new cleats step out onto that turf. It was above 120 degrees. For those of you listening, this turf field was in what I think used to be a rock quarry. And it was in the base of a rock quarry. So 3 sides are cut, literally rock walls, and the 4th was highway.
I did not know that. That makes sense now.
Yeah.
Now, what has been your most exciting trip? Not for work, more for leisure.
Probably a tie. The first would be when I was a William Penn Fellow. I went to Morocco by myself, much to my parents' chagrin. We had a week over the spring kind of spring holidays, and living outside London, it's quite easy to get pretty cheap plane tickets, and so I planned out a week in Morocco where I'd taken the train from Marrakesh all the way to Casablanca, worked my way back via the train along the coast, and then had 3 days to finish in Marrakesh. And not only did I really learn a lot traveling by myself, and that was kind of my first time traveling in a country where I had no links to the culture was entirely different, and in a lot of ways the language, I spoke a little French, but the language was totally different, and so that was a really unique and I think really good growth experience for me. That's probably tied with my trip to Australia with the developmental national team in 2017. So
cool. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention Squeaky Edgar. So he he appears in a lot of your posts, and he seems to be someone important in your life. Who is he?
So Squeaky Edgar is my travel companion. So my best friend growing up, basically sister, was a woman named Sarah, and Sarah had Ewing sarcoma. She was first diagnosed our freshman year in high school and spent most of our freshman year in Seattle because growing up in Alaska, that was the nearest cancer center. She'd live in the Ronald McDonald houses and have treatment at Seattle Children's. So she relapsed again when we were seniors in high school and had to have a bone marrow transplant. But Ronald McDonald houses are amazing at doing outings and field trips for all the kids who live there. Mm-hmm. And so right before she went into her transplant bubble, they did a trip to the Mariners games, and all the kids at the game got Squeaky Edgar. So Edgar is a rubber duck with the head of Edgar Martinez. So she got Edgar at the game, and then Edgar was with her in her transplant bubble. And then after she was cleared to travel, she actually came out to see me at college, and I got Squeaky Edgar at that point. So When I studied abroad in Scotland and played there, Squeaky came with me, and he became a great opportunity to not have to be in any of my pictures. But it was also the time when the Travelocity traveling gnome commercials had come out. So we decided we were going to take on the traveling gnome. And so all the girls that I was there with jumped on board, and he got probably 1,000 pictures in those first 4 months, and he's traveled with me ever since. So
oh my God. So in what ways does your friend Sarah inspire you today?
Unfortunately, Sarah passed away it'll be 11 years in early February now. But for a lot of people, you don't lose someone who's that important to you until maybe a little bit later in life. So having a greater understanding for people's humanity, taking more time to get to know them and their story was something that Sarah was just incredible at. So she was training, she finished her degree to become a radiation tech. And because she wanted to do for others what others had done for her. And so I think that's something she really inspired me to do is to try and really get to know people, but then also accepting them for who they are in whatever state they are, and whoever they want to be on the outside or the inside. I think that's something that she was incredible at, and I can only strive to be as kind and as gifted in a way as she was. So
yeah. What do you hope to still accomplish?
Well, I think there's still a lot of questions that I have, whether those be clinical or research. My goal isn't to write a book or write more articles. My goal is to work with athletes and get to know them and help them develop and be the best athletes that they can be. And along the way, I think that for me, that I see that purpose both as being a clinician, but also being a researcher. So where that journey will take me eventually, I don't know, but I think I'm really excited about going to work for Red Bull. They're a huge corporation, but from an athlete standpoint, I'm doing some really exciting things. So I really see a future there, and so kind of excited to see how things develop. So
thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey, Amy.
Enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.